Hi punks, what's up? I'm so excited. The cold is here. I've got some fall decorations. Oh, I didn't. Here. Better, right? Okay, so as I was saying, fall is here. It is officially here. So now I can make a video about my fall recommendation without being and without looking like I'm bringing fall too early because summer is not over. In France, it is over. It is definitely over. I'm allowed to do these videos. I'm super excited because I always enjoy watching others for recommendations. I feed on them, so here's mine, and without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, so I sorted the books out. I have definitely a huge pile of them, and I've made categories, so you'll see through the video which categories I chose. There is the timeline in the bottom of the video if you want to choose what categories interest you the most, so feel free to skip the one you don't like. I wanted to start with mangas because they're dear to my heart and I have 3 of them, starting strong with Fragments of Her by Junji Ito. This is a collection of macabre short stories in Biomaster in the horror section of mangas. Firstly, can we talk about the cover? It is gorgeous. I mean, the way it is inspired by the Scream is just perfect. I mean, look at this. Oh my god, the French version is gorgeous. And the stories inside of it are great too if you are looking for very horrific is the theme. If you're looking for a very horrific ambience with wooden house having unusual noises, dissection classes, dissection courses going wrong, and very weird but in the best way story, this is for you. I've read Tomie by Junji Ito, which is this one, and I've preferred Fragments of Horror because this one has very weird stories too and very interesting one, but this is a bit repetitive according to me. The drawings are really cool and you can see how it's evolving through the manga because at first they're not that great according to me, and at the end this is just yes, so they're really evolving through the manga, but I found it very repetitive sometimes. It's not that I don't love it, it's just that I prefer this one. I enjoyed it more. Just be aware that those stories are disturbing, but is this not what we are looking for when we are reading those kind of stories? I think this is what we are looking for. So if I convinced you, go into it. You will not be disappointed by Junji, so it's not possible. Next I have Black Butler. How not to mention Black Butler for a gothic vibe reading, because this is not that much about horror but much more about thriller and gothic vibes. As I said, set during the 19th century, this is the story of Ciel Fontamith, an English aristocrat but also an orphan, and he has a loyal butler taking care of him since he lost his parents. And Ciel is not any kind of kid. You like quickly learn that because he's an aristocrat, he inherits of a big estate of his parents. They were living in a manor, so also manor vibes. But you quickly learned that he's doing a lot of things for his queen. If you want like Sherlock Holmes but gothic English vibes with dash of fantasy and humor, this is for you. The characters are very endearing, especially Sebastian, his butler, and all the staff that are working in the manor. I'm on volume 13, but there is 13 and there is 30 of them, but I can only recommend for now because I'm not disappointed by any of the volumes. So if you're interested in it, go for it. Next, I don't have it with me, but I also recommend Death Note, which is this is the story about Light Yagami, a top student in high school, and one day he's bored and he finds a notebook on the ground, but this is not any notebook. You'll soon learn, and it is in the title, so I'm not spoiling anything, you'll soon learn that this is a death note dropped by a Shinigami, a god of death named Ryuk, and you'll see what he's doing with it. So this is a dark thriller that gives me such morally ethical questions with morally great character. The ambience of it, I just loved it. I read it when I was a teenager. Maybe I need to reread it to see if there is not cheesy, if there are not cheesy moments, but I know it is a mainstay in the manga genre, so I can only recommend it if you haven't read it yet. I just need to add that there is a turn in the plots through the manga, and it changes everything. I mean, it changes some things to the story and the ambience, and it was not the same since this event, but still it's worth it, so can only recommend it. Next, I have to talk about Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is the story of Jane, who is growing up at her aunt's house because she's an orphan, and her aunt is just like heartless, and she's growing lonely because her cousins don't want to talk to her, and she's just loving books, but she's not even allowed to really read and to have her own books. This straightens her independence, and because she doesn't get along with her aunt, who is, I repeat, heartless and mistreating her, she's sent to nuns school, which is very strict also. She's destined to be a teacher in this school, but this isn't something she wants to do. She wants to see the world by herself. She wants to emancipate from it and be her own actor, if I can say it like that. And she goes through such and so many adventures that is challenging what she's thinking and what she wants to become. And this is just, she finally find a job within the house of Mr. Rochester, and I won't say too much about it, but what a story about a strong female character in the 19th century who just wants to be herself and not be the woman of someone. And this is such an interesting story. It is not focused on the full descriptions vibes, but more wintry. But if you're looking for a gothic classic written by a female author and very well written, and has also manor vibes because she's living in a manor, very gothic settings with vivid descriptions of nature. This is also about secrets of the past, hunting the present, about family, coming out of age, and this is just one of my favorite classics for a good reason. Next is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a gothic mainstay in the classic genre. This is not one of my favorites, but I know a lot of you liked it, and some of you might like it better than I did, so I'm talking about it. This is the story of Dorian, who is a very gorgeous, young and lush and rich guy. A random guy, basically. No, not at all. And this is Oscar Wilde's only novel about a dreamlike story of a man who is selling his soul to the devil for beauty and eternal youth. This happens at late summer until kind of November. There is a jump in the timeline too, and Wilde portrays a man that is devastated by debauchery, very awful things happening to him. This book is really interesting in its way, so if you might hear of an appreciated man who has everything in the upper circles, the like artistic and most interesting circles, then you might like it. It is set also in the late 19th century in England, so go for it if you might be interested by this. Transition. If you want to keep it classic but more dark academia and back to school vibes, Dead Poet Society by N.H. Clenbum. This is about Todd Anderson and his friends going at Welton Academy. They have a new English professor, John Keating, who seems to deviate from the mainstream program of English literature, and he inspired the boys to resuscitate the Dead Poets Society, which is basically a club of poetry where they gather secretly to passionately write or just read poetry in a small circle. They decide to gather in a cave, and they're free from expectations from the school and the parents. They can just let their passion run wild, and thanks to him they not only discover the beauty of languages and words, but also how to live every moment. This is a book that came after the movie, which is quite rare, but I swear this is just about everything I could love. I'm pretty sensitive about the education topic because, short story time, I went also in a private high school, and there I struggled so much because we had really strict and and severe professors. I always struggled to manage to have the average grades, and because of that I was always looked down by my professors. Instead of just helping me and giving me advices, they were only crushing me over and over again, always telling me that I wouldn't have my, high school diploma, I would never succeed. Overall, I did not felt supported at all. We were not really taught to think by ourselves. We were taught to critique and to have a critical mind, but only in one way. We were not allowed to go in every other way. So to read about a professor who is teaching students to think by themselves and to follow the passions and to seize the day, it was perfect. I'm super sensitive to it, and I cried even though I was knowing what would happen. So that's telling a lot. So if you want to read about students who tries to follow their passion and who are pushed by a kind professor to do so, instead of just being hammered to follow a well-traced path to glorious studies such as always medicine or law, this is perfect for you. But be aware that this is also tragic. As I said, I cried, so just be aware of it. And next, if you want dark academia with thriller vibes, I have something for you. How not to talk about The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This book. So this book mainly follows our main character, who is Richard, who arrives at prestigious university in New England, and he becomes obsessed by the mysterious and selective classics program with 5 other students. Coming from a very poor and abusive background, he just wants to immerse and integrate in this group of charming, very wealthy also group. And from there things escalate, and the writing of Donna Tartt is stunning. I mean, she's a genius in terms of how she manages for you to identify and to live through her characters. You live with them, you just think with them, and it makes you ponder on humanity and what human can do in grim circumstances and how the academia influences them. Also, from the beginning, we know that someone is going to die, and I'm not saying the name, so you have a little surprise at least. And she's a genius because she manages to create and holds throughout the book. And just let me read the first and the last sentences of the prologue. I mean, there is not that many books from which I love the first and the last sentences, but I'm not reading the last sentences of the book in itself because it will spoil you something. But I'm just gonna read for you the first and the last sentence of the prologue. The snow in the mountains was melting and had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation. I mean, this is quite an entrance. I loved it. And the end of the prologue is, I suppose at one time in my life I might have had any number of stories, but now there is no other. This is the only story I will ever be able to tell. And I was subjugated, I don't know if I can say it like that, but I was in from the beginning and knew this was going to be a favorite. And if I didn't convince you to read this book already, I can't do anything more for you. I can't. Can you tell I love this book? I mean, can you tell? Next, this is not a classic, but this is still in dark academia genre, and how not to talk about If We Were Villains by ML Rio. And this is about Richard, who is coming out of jail because he was accused of killing someone, and we don't know at this point if he killed this person or not. And he's greeted by the detective that put him in jail, and he wants to know the truth because he's retiring, so Richard is telling us what happened. As one of the 7 young actors who is studying in Nelite Art University College, Oliver and his friends are always playing the same role. There's only one playing the villain, there is only one playing the hero, there is only one playing woman, and when the roles are changed, everything is going upside down. Patient shakes everything and one of them dies. Okay, we already knew that, but now they have to play the most important play of their lives, which is convincing the police that one of them didn't do it, that they didn't did it, because they don't know at this point who did it. So if you love Shakespeare and want to read about a thriller with flawed characters consumed by their passion, and when I mean consumed, they really are quoting Shakespeare all the time and they are living their role very, very deeply. I mean, very seriously. Next, if you want a book with dark academia but a dash of fantasy, Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is the story of Robin, who is an orphan from cholera in China, and he's brought to London by Professor Lowell, who doesn't seem to pay that much attention to him, and he soon learns very strictly Latin, Greek, and ancient letters, ancient languages, to enroll in the prestigious Oxford's Royal Institute of Translation, and there he will learn among other peers who soon appears to be also from abroad. I mean, they also appears to have been born abroad, and they learn about translation but also magic, because London, and this is why London and England is prestigious, it's because it is based on silver magic. Okay, I'm cheating a bit, but the magic system is based on silver working, the art of manifesting the meaning lost in translation, using enchanted silver bars, which has made the British unparalleled in power as the art and craft serves the empire's quest for colonization. And R.F. Kuang is known for touching very sensitive subjects and being raw about it. So this is talking about colonization, This is also talking about translation, and the magic system is very interesting, and this is devastating in various kind of way. Just be aware that this is not a healthy stroll in the park. This is very dark, okay? This is devastating. So if you're interested by it, please do. The evolution also of the characters in this book is it is I haven't I don't have the words. Just read it, okay? Are you well? So now that you're devastated, there are some cozy fantasy books recommendation for fall with a dash, with teeny tiny dash of romance in it. And to start, there is Legend and Lattice by Travis Baldry. Hope not to talk about it. Also, it is not possible. This is the story of Viv, who had a lifetime of bounties, and she's fed up with splashing blood. She just wants to open her little coffee shops, her little coffee shop. She decides to open one in the city of Thun, but she's quickly facing some obstacles. They are from ancient rivals, new rivals, and the fact that she has to convince the citizens to love coffee because they're not used to it. And if you want to be wrapped under a blanket with a coffee or a tea and being able to smell cinnamon and cardamom and autumn sweets basically, and if you love found family and building friendships, finding your purpose in life, this is just about vibes. There is not really heavy high stakes of fantasy in it. This is just a cozy fantasy. So if you want to be cozy, this is for you. Next, I have to talk about Emily Wald's Map of Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. Emily is a genius scholar of fairy folklore. She just wrote an encyclopedia of fairies, and now she wants to elaborate Map of Otherlands. She learned a lot of the hidden ones all along her adventures, and thanks to her academic rivals, Wendell's Bumblebee, and the chemistry is just perfect according to me. Why the sequel and not the first book, you would ask? It's just because the first book is more wintry according to me. The second one is happening in September and October, and still there is a part happening in the Alps mountains for her research, so this is also a bit wintry. But if you want to read about a strong female character just wanting to be the smartest and to discover about faith, and if you love faith and adventures and a tiny bit of love, as I said, because the chemistry between the two characters is I just love the humor in it, then this is for you. Next, I have to talk about The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Mangu Sandana. Yes, no, by Sangu Mandana. And this is about Mika, who knows she's one of the few witches in Britain, and she knows she has to kind of keep her head down, and not draw attention, because if she mingles too often with other witches, they might draw attention, and this is not what they want, because sometimes very powerful things can happen and not in the best way possible. So she's keeping her head down, and she's used to being kind of lonely because she's an orphan and she was raised in very different places. She didn't really feel like she belonged anywhere, and even now. And she's following the rules until she decides to create an online account and post videos. No website is suggested, but I think it's YouTube. And she thinks that no one will take her seriously, because who will believe she's a witch? She just planned to make it like it's a very cheap magic happening, but someone notices her and sends her a message and asks her to come and travels to a very mysterious place called Nowhere House to teach to 3 little witches witchcraft. And at first she's just at shock, she doesn't believe they're actual witches, so she goes to find out. If you want to read a heartwarming story about found family, also a tiny bit of love with the sunshine grumpy trope, because there is a grumpy librarian, this is perfect. This might be for you. Also, the characters are very endearing and the intrigue is well written, so read. Now, if you want a book just about vibes, I have the perfect thing for you. This is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which is also the author of one of my favorite books, The Starless Sea. And a circus arrives. It is simply there when nothing was yesterday, and there is no announcements, and it is only open at night. When the tents are aglow, sparkling against the night sky, a sign lights up: Le Cirque des Rêves. Behind the scene, there is a competition happening between 2 magicians. They are called Celia and Marco, and they were trained since their childhood by their respective mentor, and we don't know why. We really don't know why, and we are there all along to discover it. This is just a dreamlike, unmatched writing and vibes, and you don't understand all along everything that's happening, and it is meant to be. You have to accept it. And if you want to read about dreamlike performances in a circus, very vivid descriptions of autumnal suites, this is for you. But just be aware that there are different timelines, and often a struggle with that when there are different timelines. And it might disturb also your reading experience, but this is something I struggled with, and it didn't prevent me to like this book. Next, I have also more dark academia but horror-like stories, and let me start with Bunny by Mona Howard. This is the story of sarcastic Samantha, who is also going in a very selective writing program in New England's university. Like, everything is happening in New England either on the 19th century. I'm rambling. She's utterly repelled by the rest of her fiction writing cohort, a clique of unbearably twee-rich girls who name each other Bunny, and seems to move and speak as one. But everything changes when she's receiving an invitation to the Bunny's fabled Smut Salon and ditched her only friend, Ava, in the process. And from there on, everything escalates. Okay, so how to describe this book? This is not an easy task. First, you have to keep in mind that Samantha is a flawed character. At first, she seems to be satisfied with being an outcast and a grim girl, just sitting in a bench always and talking to someone who is not even from her university, Ava, her best friend. But she's very curious, and she always ends up in impossible situations with the bunnies. And if you want to read about a dream like writing about a sorority in the weirdest way, there are some wintry descriptions. But if you want going back to school vibes, if you want to feel like you've just came out of a dream fever, writing about sorority in the weirdest way, unhinged girl and magical realism, then this is for you. This was nothing like I've ever read, and in the best, weirdest way possible. Next, there is Ninth House by Lee Bardugo, and this is the story about Galaxy Alex Stern, who is a freshman Yale student with a very heavy background. She dropped out of school early to get into a world of shady drug dealer boyfriends, dead end jobs, and much more worse, which I will not talk about. I will let you discover it. And she's offered a second chance to enter Yale, one of the most prestigious university. But what's catch? Why? And you will learn through the book why. This is about Yale's secret society in a paranormal world. This is about very complex, with deep, heavy background character, traumatized in many ways. This is about a strong female and fierce and bold character. Overall, the pacing is not perfect. There are some lamps in the story, but the ambience is unmatched, so if it seems interesting, go for it. Next, for the horror section, I do not have it with me, and it is not Dark Academia, but this is Misery by Stephen King. This is the story of Paul Sheldon, who is a best-selling author, and he undergoes a car crash, and Annie Wilkes rescues him and decides to take care of him. She nurses him, but she happens also to be her best #1 fan, but in the weirdest way possible, because she just keeps him prisoner in her house without even him asking to be taken care of. And I've read this book like 10 years ago, and I remembered that I really enjoyed it, and that it really was shocking in the way that how I couldn't just turn the pages because I was afraid to read. I've heard there are a lot of people that didn't like it, that it's not the favorite Stephen King's book. I have to reread it, but in my memories I really enjoyed it, of what I remember of it, so still recommend it. For the literary fiction and science fiction selection, I have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is about Kathy, who is 31-year-old, if I remember well, when she's telling us her story in form of anecdotes to tell us about her life when she was a student at Helsheim boarding school, which seems to be a very quiet boarding school far from the city. Its students are well attended and well educated in arts and literature, but curiously they are taught nothing about the outside world and allowed little contact with it. Moreover, they are taught to live the healthiest life possible. So I'm not saying too much about it because it is a dream-like slash foggy book to read about coming out of age and friendships with jealousies and affections in the deepest way possible, because the connections they make in those kind of school are very deep. And this is about growing up with a whole world that is hidden from you. And I love Kazuo Ishiguro's writing because he manages to get us understand characters that are living in a world and having very different point of view of it, in a world that is very quite close or could be close to us. And just, if this interests you, just read it. I have also a book in magical realism genre other than Bonnie to recommend to you. It is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. It is not really autumnal vibes because sometimes there is summer weather description, but this is set in a coffee in a back alley of Tokyo, which served very carefully brewed coffee for 100 years. But this coffee allows you with certain rules to go back in time. If you want to be wrapped under a blanket with a coffee or a tea of your choice, reading about heartwarming short stories that can also be sad sometimes. This is perfect for you. And just be aware that sometimes the book is a bit repetitive because the rules are repeated in each story, I think, but just pass them and it will be okay. Next, for the YA genre, I'm very difficult about YA books, but there is one that I love and I'm very upset by the fact that it's not that much often talked about, and it is Anatomy by Dana Schwartz. This is set in 1817 Edinburgh, and this is about Hazel, who wants to become a surgeon in a world where women can't be a surgeon at that time. And she wants to be a surgeon more than she wants to marry. And one day she encounters Jack Currer, who is a resurrection man. He's digging up bodies from the graveyards to try to survive in a world where it's easy to die. Hazel decides to enroll in the lecture of a very well-known and appreciated professor. Dr. Surgeon becomes, and she disguises herself as a man to attend. And I won't say too much about it, but you'll see how the destiny of the two are intertwined. But the setting is telling everything, right? A strong female character with a setting, a very gothic setting, graveyards. Okay, the pacing might not be perfect, but I really recommend it for YA books. I'm not that much impressed by YA books, but this one I really loved. That's it, guys. I'm feeling like I've been talking for a huge amount of time, but we did it. This is all the 4 recommendations I have for you. I'll definitely add up to the list throughout the years, I hope, because I plan to read a lot of books this autumn with autumnal vibes. I have a whole TBR, just let me share it with you. I have One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I have This Violence Delight by Mika Nemerever, and these two I have it physically and I plan to read it. I plan to read them this month. I need also to read Hellbent by Lee Bardugo because I loved Ninth House and I want to know what happens next very quickly. I really want to read any T. Kingfisher's books, especially What Moves the Dead, Nettle and Bone. I need also to read A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saff. It is out and I have to go buy it. I want to read it so badly this month. I hope I can manage to do that. I also want to get into A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, Slewfoot by Brom, and maybe later The Spell Shop, Belladonna in the Company of Witches, Mexican Gothic and To Kill a Mockingbird, and also the Yellow Wallpaper. I need to read that. So yes, this is it. If I didn't mention a book that you think I need to read this autumn, please comment. And thank you for clicking, thank you for watching till the end, and thank you for being nice, as always. And I hope to see you on the next video. Bye!